Hello, can you hear me? After that wonderful performance by Manu Joseph and his group, in the Kadalagattan, I don't know if you're all interested. Are you interested? Good, wonderful. Which school are you from? Is it a calicut school? And you are all in which grade? Let me guess. Six? Seven. Wonderful. Okay, so the introduction was a little outdated. Let me introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Shobha Tharoor Srinivasan, and about 10 or 12 years ago, I quit my job working with people with disabilities. I was a development director, and I was supporting program funding. I was writing grants to Department of Education, Department of Rehabilitation, that kind of thing. And I decided that I used to tell stories to my children when they were growing up, and I decided that I was going to put my energies into doing something different. So I started out first as a voiceover talent. Does anybody know what a voiceover talent is? Arya? So a voiceover talent is somebody who uses their voice to tell a story, to deliver a message, to sell a product, to essentially, you can use your voice on an answering machine. Hello, you've reached the Srinivasan residence. Please leave a message after the tone. That's also a voiceover. The announcements you hear on the planes, that's also a voiceover. The books that you read in that you hear on an audio tape, those are also voiceovers. So I started out doing that, and then I decided that I would start writing, and so I've been published. My first children's book that was in India was published by DC Books, and their children's section was called Mango, Ipalunda. So it's Mango Books, and they did 3 of my books. And then after that, I started publishing in America, and now I'm quite entrenched in the children's writing sphere. I have published many books. But today's session is called Storytelling, and it's from this book called A Treasure Trove of Timeless Tales. And what's exciting, though it's not done by DC Books, it has been translated into Malayalam. Endila copy, I have not received it yet. It just came out about a month ago, and it was done by Manorama Books. A lady called Rosemary translated it, and that available in bookstores and everywhere. So it's called Treasure Trove of Timeless Tales, and I will talk to you about the book for a little bit, and then I will read to you 1 or 2 stories. Is that okay? Wonderful. Now, this book is part of a series that Westland Books wanted me to do. And the idea was that we either do retellings or original stories that are classical in theme. I have been contracted to write 3 books in the Treasure Trove of Timeless Tales. This first one is a Treasure Trove of Timeless Tales. This one, which just came out last month, is called Look Before You Leap. And Look Before You Leap is a book in which there are stories from the Aesop's fables and Panchatantra, but what we're doing is we're tracking idioms. Do you know what an idiom is? Anybody? So Look Before You Leap is an idiom. It's raining cats and dogs. Have you heard that phrase? It's raining cats and dogs. So, does it mean that cats and dogs are falling from the sky? No, it just means it's raining a lot. So an idiom is when you use a phrase that doesn't literally mean what it says. But in every culture we have them. And I wish I remembered some good Malayalam idioms, but there are so many in Malayalam, and there are many in Hindi. They're called muhavres. So idioms are there and part of every language, and it's a wonderful way for you to connect with the culture that you are hearing from. So this second book is looking at idioms that have come from classical tales. But today's session, as I said, is called Treasure Trove of Timeless Tales. And the book is stories from all over the world. So I will read you a couple of different stories. But what's interesting about it is my thesis with this book is that we are all part of the same wide world, are we not? So you may be sitting in India, somebody may be sitting somewhere else, but the whole idea of storytelling is to make connections, all of us are storytellers. I'm sure you're all writing stories in your free time, you're telling stories to your friends, you're sitting with them and playing games where you are sharing stories, right? Do you remember the old games that people used to play called Chinese whispers? Remember, Arilia? Where one person will say something in somebody's ear, and then that person tells somebody in their ear. When we were children, we used to play these games because words were the biggest form of entertainment for us, right? We didn't have video games and so many television stations and all of those things that all of you have. But if you read, you're transported into a whole other world, aren't you? You learn new vocabulary, you get to travel to different places in these stories. So let me read you, I have stories from Japan, I have a story from Native American tales. I have stories from Panchatantra. I have many different stories. Tennali Raman. I have many, many stories in this. I have some stories that I wrote that are from my own past. So the idea is that these stories, the one thing in common is that it's all about our past. All about the past, okay, in this first book. So which story should I read first? Does anybody know what they want to hear? You want a Panchatantra story? Is that what you first want? Or do you want something unusual? Huh? We'll read a few stories because we have one whole hour to read to each other. And at the end of this book, there's a very interesting section, and they're called 100-word stories. And I wrote about 8 or 9 of those stories for you. And I've told all of you to go home after you look at this book and write 100-word stories. 100-word stories are stories that are not 99 words or not 101 words. So if you've written a story that's 99, how do you make it 100? You can add a descriptive adjective or an adverb, right? And similarly, if your story has 102 or 103 words and you only want 100, what do? You reduce a long phrase that may have too many words and write something with a much more descriptive word so that you're only at 100. And you know, when I take this book all over the place, teachers say to me in schools that they do this exercise in class with the children and they have a really good time doing that. Okay, enough hearing me talk. I'm going to read to you now. So, why don't I read you? This is a story that I wrote myself. It is not something that you may have read, but it is a variation of this story was told to me by my grandmother when I was a child. So I am going to read you a story called The Sun, the Wind, the Moon, and the Sky. Has anybody heard that story? Arya. This is a story that my grandmother passed away a few years ago, but when I was little, I remember I heard this story. So I thought about it and I wrote it, and I may have made some changes, but it's basically the story that I heard as a child. Just one more story, please, Amma, Renuka pleaded as she climbed into bed. Okay, Kanna, one last one, her mother replied with a smile. She tucked the blankets around Renuka's shoulders to keep the child in bed and not clamor for more after the story. The 8-year-old grinned impishly, pleased about the extra time before Amma switched the lights off. She waited for her favorite story, the tale of the sun, the wind, the moon, and the sky. Long, long ago, when the world was still young, the sun, the wind, and the moon went to feast with their uncle and aunt, Thunder and Lightning. Their mother, the Sky, whose many duties prevented her from accompanying them for such outings, wished them a happy time. She continued to hold up the world and await their turn. Awaited their return. Both the sun and the wind were thoughtless boys. They forgot about their mother as soon as they left her. On the other hand, Moon, who trailed behind, kept thinking about her mother, who couldn't join them. When the boys reached their uncle and aunt's house, they were not disappointed. Long tables were laden with fruits and vegetables. There were large, fleshy jackfruits piled on glittering plates. Juicy mangoes and papayas heaped into sparkling bowls, and jeweled yams and colorful peppers laid out on silver trays. There were savory offerings as well. After getting the greetings out of the way, sun and wind rushed to the tables and gorged on mounds of fragrant biryani, smothered with raisins and cashew nuts. They stuffed themselves with long green okra. What's okra? Vendaka, fried to perfection, and filled their mouths with soft fish marinated in ginger, tomatoes, and chili powder. They ate until they thought they would burst and thought only of themselves. On the other hand, their sister, the gentle Moon, ate only a little of the feast offered. She thought her mother, whose responsibilities had kept her away from the feast. She saved a portion of her food to take home. Moon did not have the strength and power her brothers did, but she was kind and thoughtful and loved to share and give. Children, how was the feast? Sky asked Sun. Sky asked Sun, Wind, and Moon on their return. Did you bring anything for me? She merely posed the question to test them. She was more interested in their response than any gift or food offering. What do you mean, Mother? Sun asked insolently. Why should we bring anything for you? We didn't go for such a purpose. We were invited as guests for dinner. Besides, you're not used to such rich food and delicacies that we ate. You would not have enjoyed the feast. Wind blustered as well and followed his bold brother's lead. How could we have carried the food with us, Mother? We went out in fine robes. Our pockets would have become dirty, and the food would have soiled our elegant clothes. You cannot expect that of us. And there's a picture as well in the book. Sky then turned to her daughter Moon. Noticing her mother's disappointed face, Moon said, I have brought you samples of all the food we ate, dear mother. You should have your dinner now. May you live long, my child, Sky said with pride. Turning to her sons, she exclaimed, You will lose much due to your selfishness, boys. You, my eldest, went out to feast and never thought of your mother. Although she supports you all day and is your protector, you shall always live in an eternal fire. Your rays will be scorching and shall burn all it touches. Men and women will stay away from you when you blaze in pride. Turning to Wind, she said, And you, hungry wind, will always blow in dry weather and parch and shrivel those you touch. Men and women will be inconvenienced and take shelter away from you when you are around. She looked at Moon with pride. But you, my sweet daughter, who thought more of another than yourself, will endure always. You shall be cool, calm, and beautiful. Your soft hue will inspire poetry and song. Men, women, and children will marvel at your beauty and charm. They will be full of love when they see you. You will always be blessed and cherished. That is why the sun is disliked when it beats down too hotly. Isn't it, Amma? asked Renuka. Yes, and the wind is disliked when it blows too strongly, replied her mother. And the moon is loved by all. Renuka smiled dreamily as her eyes began to grow heavy. She kissed her mother and settled into sleep with her head full of plans for the next day. Tomorrow I will make my bed as soon as I wake up. I will tidy the toys and books on my bedroom floor so no one steps on them. Tomorrow I will help Appa clear up the leaves in the garden. I'm going to be a good helper from now on. I'm going to share more. With those sweet thoughts, Renuka fell asleep happily in the pale moonlight that filtered through her window. Has anybody heard this story before? Did any of your grandmothers tell you this story? No? But did you notice it's an interesting story? It's sort of an origin myth, right? Because we're getting an idea of why is it the sun is always blazing, how we protect our eyes from the sun, how we can't get very close to it, how when we are looking up at the sky during an eclipse or anything else, we shouldn't be looking at the sun directly because it could hurt our eyes. Remember all these? This is all scientific facts. But these old stories, like what my grandmother told me, was a story that talks about origins. Now you will find, if you read this book, that all of the stories have a different kind of origin. So for instance, there's a Japanese story in this book called Ison Boshi. And if you read the story, you'll find maybe, or I don't know if you've read them in your school books, there used to be a story called Tom Thumb. Has anybody heard of Tom Thumb? You've heard of it? Or Thumbelina? So Thumbelina and Tom Thumb come from two different parts of the world. One is coming from the Scandinavian countries, the other comes from England, and Ison Boshi comes from Japan, which is far away in Asia, right? But you will find that the stories are so similar. Small little changes everywhere, but ultimately all our stories are connected. Even this young boy who asked about Panchatantra, today there are arguments, does Panchatantra come first or does Aesop's fables come first? So many of the stories we've read in Panchatantra, we find them in Aesop's fables. There are changes, but they're all related. And because the story that I wrote was based on something I heard when I was a child, it was selected by Silicon Valley Shakespeare in California, and they performed the story of Renuka asking her mother the story of the sun, the wind, and the moon. Because you know why? All of these stories in different ways create myths as well. So mythology is not just the Ramayana and the Mahabharata or any of our old epics. We have mythology even in our own stories, in the stories you and I tell each other, in the stories you hear from your Charamas or your Muttashis or your Anumas all over, right? So does anybody want to hear I'll tell you what, does anybody want to ask me questions before I read another story? We can send the mic to you. You're all feeling shy. That little girl is shaking her head vigorously. Nobody wants to ask any questions, Allah? Okay, what do you want to hear next? Shall I read a short 100-word story? Okay, because then you'll get a sense. They're very different from a long story like I just read to you. A short 100-word story will finish like that. But listen, because it'll always have some little twist to it, right? Okay, let's see. So this story is called, I Discovered a Secret Miniature World in My Bedroom. So it's a very short story. Listen, okay? Don't talk to each other. It's very short. Are you listening? Yes? Very good. I have discovered a secret miniature world in my bedroom. And in it, my imaginary friends, my imaginary food, and my imagined stories are part of everything I once knew outside of here. It's as though I have another world in this place where I am in charge, where I can make up my own rules, and where I can do exactly as I please. The freedom for fun is tremendous. Huh? But there's just one problem. I hear my parents calling me for dinner. It seems I will have to leave this world for the other one for a while. So what do you think? Did you like that? The reason I wrote these 100-word stories is because I want you all to go home and write 100-word stories too. Because that's the way to get started, right? It's so simple, so easy. Shall we read another 100-word story? Because they're short, just see how you can be creative even with just 100 words. This one is called Seeing a Ghost. What is a ghost? Do you know? Pradam. Yeah. Seeing a ghost. Shall we read that? My brother was a great storyteller. I liked when he made us laugh. But sometimes his stories were not funny. My sister and I clung together after spooky tales, but she could fall asleep. My imagination always triumphed. That night, every shadow looked like a ghost. I quaked under the bed sheets until finally sleep came. Suddenly, I felt a fall near the bed and a touch on my shoulder. My eyes shot open. I saw a ghost. I screamed, turning on the light. I saw white pajamas. A breeze from the open window had blown them over to the bed. What do you think? Do you like that? Let's read 100-word stories. I think they're fun because they're short. Shall we read some more? Okay, this one is called, I wrote these 100-word stories during the pandemic, at a time when all of you couldn't go to school, when you couldn't go meet your friends, when you were all sitting at home, right? Did you have that too? Did you have online classes? You did, right? So our Samayappa, it was very exciting to write stories, to read stories. I used to do a video program. Every day I read stories to children in India from my home in California. In the evening, I would come on to YouTube. I would actually wear my pajamas because it was late at night, but I would change my kurta because you could only see me from here. And then I would read stories that I retold, short stories from the Panchatantra, from Tenali Raman, from all of those stories. And you won't believe it, about 2,000 children would log in for these 3-minute stories every day. And I did it for 72 days as a sort of volunteer effort for children. So it was a lot of fun. So anyway, at that time, we all had time in the house and we all wrote a lot of stories. And I want you all to try to do this, okay? Please? Yes? That's your promise. Okay, so this one is called An Animal That Came Back from Extinction. Wouldn't it be perfect if dinosaurs came back to Earth today? They would be the army that we need to blow away, trample on, scorch with fire, or swallow up with giant teeth the virus that has spread from place to place and country to country so swiftly. Dinosaurs are so large, fierce, and magnificent that they will form an impenetrable wall of resistance. The virus wouldn't have a chance to enter. Forget about it taking over the world. The dinosaur is the perfect animal to come back from extinction, and it would be the perfect weapon that destroys COVID-19. So you can basically write about anything, can't you? When you're writing 100-word stories. Do you know there's something else called sestudes? And those are 64-word stories. So you can, it's all different forms of what they call flash fiction. So how much time do we have? We have plenty of time. Oh my gosh, nobody's asking any questions. No questions at all? What story do you want to hear? Do you want to hear a story from, since he said Panchatantra, I'm going to read from this book. It's called Look Before You Leap. Shall I do that? And I told you, what are we doing in this book? We're looking for idioms in the stories. And I told you what an idiom is when we started, remember? Okay. So this is a very short story, and it's called As Bold as Brass. Have you heard the term as bold as brass? So as bold as brass is also a very old and well-known idiom. And an idiom, what did I tell you? An idiom is a phrase That's a colorful phrase. We have them in all our languages. And if anybody, one of the parents or teachers here, know a Malayalam idiom, I would love to hear it. There are so many beautiful ones, but sadly I've forgotten them all. But I know my mother used to say them as a joke. I have friends who speak Malayalam who say them. And they're very colorful ways of speaking. They are not to be taken literally. What does literally mean? So you don't take each word literally. Like I gave you the example of raining cats and dogs. It's not raining poochas and nayas from the sky, right? It just means it's raining a lot. So it's a colorful phrase that shouldn't be, it's a figurative language. It means it draws pictures in your mind. So when I say it's bold as brass, Adu parnja, what is bold as brass? What is brass in Malayalam? Anybody know? Chemba, le? Is it chemba or is chemba bronze? Okay, chemba, it might be chemba. Now, chemba is not something that shines like gold, does it? Usually it doesn't shine like gold or silver. It's a little bit more sort of rusty looking, but it's a beautiful metal nonetheless. Now, when you say as bold as brass, what that term means is somebody who's very brave, or very bold, who's courageous, who's not afraid to do something difficult. So this story is called as bold as brass. And you can find it in the Panchatantra, you can probably see it in Aesop's fables as well. Once, a hungry jackal was walking through the forest in search of food when he heard a very disturbing sound. Oh my God, what is this deep, booming noise? Perhaps it is some large and fierce animal that is looking for food. If it finds me, it'll surely make a meal of me. Frightened and worried, the jackal decided to flee the scene. But as he turned, a more courageous part of him said, "Why should I run away without knowing the cause of the sound? Perhaps nothing to be afraid of after all." He was as bold as brass. The jackal walked towards the sound and found himself on an abandoned battlefield. In the middle of the field was a large war drum resting near a tall tree. Every time the wind blew, it rustled the tree's branches, which brushed against the drum and caused a deep sound. "There is no animal here, and there's no threat to be afraid of," said the jackal, laughing. He walked up to the drum and bravely beat a sound on both sides of it. As he walked on in search of food, he called out confidently, "It pays to be as bold as brass, the brave succeed." So you all know that story, right? Who knows the story from the Panchatantra of the crow and the pitcher? Come on, you all know that story. Please tell me that people are still reading these old stories. Arya, do you know the crow and the pitcher? No? You do know it? What happens? What is the story of the crow and the pitcher? Parayu? You can tell me in Malayalam also, I understand. What happens? Give him the mic. Don't be shy, it's just us. Mic venda. But you know the story. You want me to read it to you? And you tell me, before I read it to you though, I want you to tell me what the idiom is in that story. Or maybe I'll read it to you and then you tell me what it is, okay? So I am not going to tell you the name of the story. Okay, I'm not going to tell you the name of the story, but when I read it, I want you to tell me what do you think the idiom could be. Okay? Ready? One of you has to tell me, one of the adults or volunteers also can tell me. This is from Aesop's fables actually, not Panchatantra, though I think a version is in Panchatantra as well. One hot summer day, a thirsty crow flew about in search of water. She looked everywhere, but she couldn't find any water. She then noticed a pitcher under a tree and the glint of water at its base. The crow flew down and tried to put her beak into the spout of the pitcher to drink the water. But the opening was far too narrow for her beak. She was very thirsty, so she thought long and hard. The crow had an idea. She decided to drop pebbles into the pitcher so that the water level would rise. With each pebble she dropped into the pitcher, the water began to rise. Little by little, the water reached the opening of the pitcher, and the crow was able to dip her beak in and drink to her heart's content. She flew away happily, knowing that whenever she was in a pinch, using her mind would help. What would be this idiom? Pariyu? Children, tell me. Has anybody heard the idiom? Anybody? Have any of you heard the idiom, necessity is the mother of invention? Kettitle. See, you should read these stories and then you'll get an idea of idioms that come from it. And then you can impress your classmates and your teachers by using these idioms in your stories. Allah. So necessity is the mother of invention is a very old and common idiom. If you were doing a lot of English reading, you'll definitely know it. And it could be that we have that in Malayalam also. Does anybody have any Malayalam idioms to share with me? Please. I would love to hear one. Inikki onnu padikkanam. Endama? Inikki kekkanilla. Onnu parayu, valikki parayu. Parayu. Manasilayilla. So so adi ettiyal aarum veezhum. Alla. So you're saying if you make a mistake, everybody will fail if mistakes are made. Okay, that sounds more like a sort of a proverb or more than an idiom. Because you know why? Adi kittiyal aariyum veezhum. So Aniyam Vijam. Oh, Aniyam Vijam. I like that. That makes more sense. Appa Adigitya Aniyam Vijam means even if somebody is really strong and powerful, if they really get beaten, even an animal like that can fail. That's a good one. Thank you. Thank you. Manasilayilla. Alla adu manasilayi iniki adigathiyada manasilayi. Is there any more like that? Ida, she knows one. I can't hear you, darling. You have to get the mic. Sorry. There's a lot of wind and there's cross noise. You can hear the other side more clearly here. Oh, if you miss a step. Oh, അത് മനസ്സിലായില്ല. ഞാൻ വിചാരിച്ചു ഒരു അടിന്ന് a slap. Good point. Good point. But do we have any more like that? Does anybody know some good ones? Ariyo? Parayu? അത് പറഞ്ഞ? Interesting. Actually, isn't it so colorful in other languages? I just love to hear it. In Hindi, they're called muhavre. And the muhavres are full of these lovely little colorful phrases. And they don't always mean, for instance, in my book of Look Before You Leap, I'll read to you the, see, you must have heard some of this. Honesty is the best policy. Slow and steady wins the race. Adakka kettitille. I'm sure you've heard it. And the lion's share എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താണ്? Means the bigger portion, right? So the kada in this book is talking about how the lion is getting a bigger portion. But the idea is it could have originated from that story. But a lion's share today means a large amount. Not exactly a lion. It's nothing to do with Simham, Mara or lions. It is to do with the fact that if somebody takes the bigger portion, that's the lion's share. So that's what I'm saying. An idiom is essentially a colorful phrase that cannot be taken literally, but you can, it's figurative language that is full of color. And we have them in every language. Somebody was telling me one in Gujarati, but now I've forgotten that too. But you know, wherever I go to schools, children tell me different muhavres and different language idioms. So that's a lot of fun. So this book, A Treasure Trove of Timeless Tales, is the first one in the series. And it has the 100-word stories. It has many stories from different parts of the world. It has stories from Japan. It has a Native American story. And then this one is the book on idioms, the origin of idioms. And the next one I'm going to write in the series is going to be a collection of stories that I call Around the World with ABC. And we're going to tell stories from different parts of the different countries in the world. So maybe, I haven't started writing it, so if you have some ideas, you can tell me. When we get to I, we can do India, but we will also go all around the world with stories, because that should be a lot of fun for kids, right? Yeah? So I'm very surprised. You know, in Delhi, if I was sitting with a group of students, every hand goes up, because everybody wants the mic and they all want to talk. Here, none of you want to say anything, and when I ask you, you're all shaking your heads. So what do we want to do now? We have, how much time do we have? We have time if you want another story or if you have questions. I'm not going to be able to do song and dance, but I'll tell you something I do. Opariyu.
What, in your opinion, is the importance of writing stories for children? Many people will argue that writing serious stories for adults is more important. How do you think writing stories for children helps shape the society?
That's wonderful. What is your name?
Niranjan. Niranjan.
Oh, Niranjan. Hi, Niranjan. That's an excellent question. Did you all hear his question? He said, a lot of people think that story writing is mainly for adults. What do you think are the important elements that children can also learn so that they can write stories, right? Well, one of the first things I say, and you've heard this from everybody, is you need to read. Without reading, you need to read the kind of books you want to read. You don't have to read only what the teachers tell you to read or what your parents tell you to read. Read a comic book if you want, read a graphic novel if you want, but keep reading. Reading will improve your vocabulary, will help you travel to different parts of the world, will give you an idea of structure. Do you know that when I write a story, so I had written a book called Prince with a Paintbrush, the story of Raja Ravi Varma, Niranjan. Now, that is an illustrated biography, and you may have all read stories of historical figures in your school books. Usually a biography starts with so-and-so was born on this day, then this happened, and then they died or whatever, and you go through a timeline, right? So when I was told to write a book about Raja Ravi Varma, actually it was my idea, but the publisher wanted me to write it. And the reason we were going to do Raja Ravi Varma, which all of you may have heard of because you are all from Kerala, and he was born in a place called Kilimanur. Pashe, lot of children in India don't know Raja Ravi Varma. They know Van Gogh, they know Leonardo da Vinci, they can recognize Mona Lisa, they can recognize Manet's wildflowers, they can recognize water lilies, they can recognize Starry Night. But if you tell them, do you know Jatayuvad, do you know Galaxy of Musicians, nobody knows. So I thought it's important for me to write about an artist who is so beloved in Indian history, whose art is still there even in Amar Chitra Katha comics, even in calendar posters. Recently they did a calendar for charity 2 years ago in which they took film actresses all dressed as Ravi Varma women. So they had Shakuntala, Nala Damayanti, the Damayanti and different things, all well-known personalities and celebrities, all dressed up, and the calendar sold for a few thousand rupees and they raised money that way. So Raja Ravi Varma's art is still very popular and everybody likes him. And you know why it is so? Because he was one of the first painters. See, usually painting in those days was only bought by rajas and courtiers and big people in courts or very rich people. because art is an expensive commodity, right? But Ravi Verma made art accessible to all because he started a printing press. I know, Niranjan, I'm getting to your point. It's a long story. He started a printing press and he made copies of his paintings. So everybody started being able to afford to buy them. And you won't believe it, even when I was growing up in our Puja Muri, there was Mahalakshmi and Saraswati pictures were all Raja Ravi Verma paintings. Photo print picture at the tiny frame. And a lot of people do that. All over India, you will find that Ravi Verma paintings. If you go to your Ammuma's house or even your own home, go and see if you have any paintings. It's very much accessible. He made the art. He was like an ambassador. Even though he had never traveled abroad, his art went to Chicago, to Vienna, everywhere. So here's my answer, Niranjan. In order to write this biography about Ravi Verma, I wanted to make it interesting for children. So what did I do? I framed the story in an interesting way. Adu parnya, what is framing the story? Framing the story in the Varna, how do I tell you the story? Were they dates and photos of will children pick it up and read it? Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll think it's boring or it's historical, right? But instead, I wanted to make the story interesting. So I framed it from the perspective of a child. So we have a double narrative. We have a child asking questions, and we have the story of Ravi Verma. So when the child is asking questions, on every page, there's like a comic bubble, and the child is saying, so when Ravi Verma gets married at the age of 18 to a 12-year-old, this child is 8 and she says, Ayyo, I don't want to get married at 12. Thank God times have changed, correct? So that is the kind of thing. So children found this book so interesting that they voted it as the best book of the year. This was in 2021. And then Amitabh Bachchan in Kaun Banega Crorepati was using Ravi Verma's story as a clue. Now, why did these things happen? Because it was done slightly differently. So if you read a lot, what you can do, Niranjan, is learn techniques of how to tell a story as well, right? So those are the things. You need to keep reading. It'll expand your vocabulary. It'll give you ideas. It'll tell you what is liked by people. Because if a book is a bestseller, what does that mean? Lots of children are buying it and they're reading it, right? Now, there's another story that he mentioned. The book is coming out. It came out more than a year ago. And it's called Parvati the Elephant's Very Important Day. And that book is written entirely in rhyme. That means it's a poem, but it's an adventure story, and it's about an Anna, the Anna that you told me about. But it is an Anna in a Kerala temple. And so what we see is I introduce 9 to 10 Malayalam words. I talk about Nettipattam, Panjavadyam. All these words are introduced because the temple elephant in this story is getting to carry the Tidamba. Usually only the Tuskers carry it. But what is literary license? Literary license varna kada edana ala can write what they want to write. So I made sure that a female elephant can carry, because why? Girls can do anything boys can do too, right? Yes. So these are different ways of sharing that kind of story. So that book is there as well. So knowing how to frame stories, the more you read, the better ideas you'll get. So that is what I'm doing. It's a picture book that is supposed to be, you're supposed to look at the pictures, but I have put in other elements into the story. The music of Kerala traditions. I have put in the culture. I put in the costume. And so even later in life, you can go back and pick up Parvati the Elephant's Very Important Day and learn more. Okay, long answer because we had so much time. Any other question? Yes.
What are the qualities that need to write a story?
Well, I kind of told you, right? You have to have curiosity. You need to have imagination. You need to have an understanding of what people want to read, right? Are we running out of time? Okay. So all of those qualities, curiosity, questions, familiarity with interesting words, knowing your subject, all are the qualities. Any more?
One more simple question. Okay.
Same boy, anybody else? Does anybody, why don't I hear from one of the girls first? Come on. Please give a mic to that girl. Thank you. And tell me your name. I'd love to say hello.
Hello. My name is Parul. And
Parvati?
Parul.
Paru, okay.
Parul.
Paru.
Is there any books that you suggest to teenagers that
Absolutely.
influence you?
So I read this book called My Family and Other Animals. Have you heard of it? My Family and Other Animals was written by somebody called Gerald Durrell. And it's a really funny book. And I read it, I think, in class 8. And even today, I remember some of the words I learned from that book. Because at that time in Calcutta, where I went to school, our vocabulary was quite good because we were all reading and we were in English medium, as they say. But we didn't know. There was one word I learned in that book, and it was pusillanimous. Do you know what pusillanimous means? Isn't that a sort of musical word? Ariyo, enda arthanna? No? Pusillanimous means cowardly. So cowardly means pusillanimous. I truly learned from that book, My Family and Other Animals, because when we read that book in school, the teacher said, all the words you don't know, write it in a notebook, learn how to spell it and know the meaning. We had to write all these words down. So for some reason, even after these years, I remember definitely I learned the word pusillanimous from that book. And it's a book of a family holiday in Corfu, which is a Greek island, and it's a very funny book, so you might enjoy that. There are many wonderful writers in India today as well, so there are many books to read. But since I read this and I learned this word from there, I'm sharing it with you. Yes. Okay. Are we sort of done? Oh.
Do you believe in comic characters you heard the story in your childhood?
Who wrote?
Do you believe in the character, the story you heard in your childhood?
Do I believe? Okay. Do I believe the stories I heard in my childhood? Well, they were wonderful stories. Of course, when I heard ghost stories, my ammaman used to tell me stories about if you go to this tree, there's a yakshi, and all those scary things we heard. When I was a child, I believed it, and I never went anywhere near there. I was terrified. But as I grew up, I didn't believe them. So, some of the stories you hear, you believe. Some of it you don't. But what you realize is that stories are all different ways of making connections with each other, right? So people tell stories to bring people close, to share ideas with them. And very often the stories are stories we have all heard in different ways. So it brings the universal connection together. I believe some of the stories and some I don't. Thank you. Interesting questions. Do you want me to read one more story or are we all done? Anybody want to hear another story? This session was supposed to have been entirely of me reading stories. Yes? No? Questions or stories? Do you want to hear a story? Okay, from this book or this book? This book? Okay, Ada. Okay, the vote for this book. Put your hands up. Okay, and the vote for this book? I think this book won. Okay, so I'm going to read you the story. It's going to be my last story, okay? I'm going to read you the titles. You pick which. Yeah. So I already read you the sun, the wind, the moon, and the sky, okay? And I've read you from the 100-word stories. Now the next stories are Ison Boshi, Kayamgulam Kochunni and the Money Lender, Kammappa the Monster and No King is God from Africa, Ganesha and the Moon, Puranic legend, Tennali Raman and the Red Peacock, The Lion and the Donkey, a Panchatantra tale, How the Animals Got Sunlight, a Native American folk tale, The Mouse and the Merchant, lessons in economics from the Jataka tales, Aesop's Fables, The Doll in a Red that I wrote, the story of a poor man that I wrote, a lovable thief that I wrote, and then the 100 which are called lockdown stories. In the mark, the doll in the red sari. Do you want to hear that story? Okay, so that's a slightly grown-up story. Are you all ready to hear it? It's perfect for it, okay? It's a little sad, but it's an interesting story. Okay. And you know what's different about the story? It's quite a long story. It's written in many parts of speech. That is, it's giving you ideas of different ways to write. Do you understand? So I want you to hear it and hear the different. This is in first person. What is first person? Where the person is thinking aloud, okay? Hi Ram. It is so hot today. The season of Lu. The unbearably hot and gusty wind is the most difficult, especially when one has to stand on the pavement and wait for the traffic light to turn red. The tar is melting under my feet, and I feel like sitting under the shade of the neem tree. But no, I must persist. It will be so special to buy that beautiful doll, so new and lovely in the shiny red sari, for my sister's birthday. Gunja, really a prize of a doll, with the bright bin on her forehead, shimmering bangles and the sparkle jewel slippers on her feet. I must sell 6 more dusters, cloth dusters soon. If I sell a few more, I'll have enough money. That clever doll maker with her nimble fingers has said it will be mine soon. Mansalavanda, what is the story? It's a story of a little child, especially in the big cities in Bombay and Delhi. When you're stopped at a traffic light, very often children come and knock on your door and ask you to buy things they are selling. So this story is about one such child, okay? I am so pleased that I was able to give her 1 rupee yesterday instead of 50 paisa. She told me that it'll be mine for another 2 rupees. That doll is so special. I know that Gunjan has been all for a while. Yay, there's a Maruti car. I like Maruti cars. It's so much easier to get my hand in through the window since the car is small and the windows are low. Otherwise, I have to bounce up and down to be seen, and then I could drop my dusters. Array, it's quick. Mic and door. It's going away. Hello? Hello? That quick-footed fellow Arun has already reached the car. Like a sap in the basket, I'm going to make sure to weave my head back and forth and keep my eyes fastened on the road for a potential customer. I can feel it. Today will be a lucky day. The cars have stopped again. Let me dodge quickly between them. Are people interested in this story? Hello? Kekano? So what happens ultimately? It's all in first person. The child is thinking about it. And he says the traffic light is turning green. I like the rain. It washes the dust off my body. Hello? No. Yes. Okay. Yesterday I played in the puddles and danced and twirled like a peacock. So what we're hearing is all of his thinking about wanting to sell the dusters. Then he says, I want to move near the bhutta wala. You know what a bhutta wala is? Corn on the cob. Ivada kittu, namku corn on the cob. What is corn on the cob? Ariyo? I don't know how to say it in Malayalam. I used to have it in Bombay, Delhi, and in the North India. Street chutta corn vitkum. It's called corn on the cob. So the child is imagining eating all of that. Okay, so it's all in first person. Then what happens? We come to third person. So hear how it sounds. Now it is not the child's thoughts, it's something else. The cloudburst was swift and sudden. The sky darkened. The leaves and debris on the street blew against Ramu's feet. and the rain poured down. The scene changed dramatically. Cars began to roll up their windows. Ramu poised his feet to run alongside the vehicles if they began to move. The Bhuttawala put out his chula, gathered his basket of corn, and began looking for refuge. The ironing woman folded her table under the mango tree and hastily wrapped the clothes she had been ironing into the folds of a large bed sheet. The other children abandoned their chores and, kicking up their heels with glee, danced in the forming puddles. So our section is an omniscient narrator. It's in third person. Now we come back to first person and Ramu, and this is his thoughts. Oh, good, the traffic light is still red. This is my lucky day and I have no more competition. I can almost feel the soft folds of the red sari on Gunjan's new doll. Here's a car with children. Please don't roll up the window. My shirt is clinging to me. I hope the notes in my pocket don't get wet. It's his thoughts, right? Mem Saab, please buy dusters. Large, soft dusters. Clean car well, Mem Saab. I'll give 3 dusters for 5 rupees. Okay, Mem Saab, for you 4 dusters. These are the best dusters, Mem Saab. You don't have change? Okay, take 5 dusters for 5 rupees. Please, madam. And then he gives it to them. Hurrah, I've made it, I've done my sale. There's money for mother and 2 rupees for the doll maker. I can't wait to see my sister's happy face on her birthday. She'll be so happy to have this doll with its red sari. Gunjan, I can't wait to show you what I have for you. I love this rain. Hey guys, I sold my dusters. I sold all my dusters. Did you understand the story? Manslayo. Even in Kerala, do children come and try to sell things in the... We don't have so many children here doing that. But you know, in the cities, if you go to Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi, everywhere in the traffic lights, there are many children who come to sell things. They're selling dusters. You know what a duster is? It's a ruchere kashnam thuni. Adonda car wipe, we can wipe other things in the house to dust. It's called a duster because you can dust with it, right? So a lot of children even today are selling dusters. They're selling fans, they're selling pens, they're selling peacock feathers, they're selling roses. So it's a very, very common sight. I thought I'll write this story because what I wanted to show that the idea of giving and sharing and loving is not just something that all of you do. Everybody does it at every stage. Even children who don't have a lot of money, they also share with other people, right? So I wanted to give you that idea, that the idea of love, of caring, of equality, of children, of sisters, of siblings, it is there. It's a universal thing and it's there for everyone. It's important for all of us to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. Have you heard that? That's another idiom. Let's put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. What does that mean? Parayu? What does it mean, Jan Arya? To put yourself in somebody else's shoes, the Varnya, not to go and take your shoes and put my foot into that. It means to experience and understand how other people also do things. Thank you so much, Calicut. Thank you very much, all of you. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your excellent questions. I had a really good time talking to all of you, and I really appreciate it. I don't know if any of my books are in the bookstore, but I will be here tomorrow. I will be here day after. If you buy books and you want it signed by me, I'll be more than happy to personalize and sign it for you. Thank you again. Take care.